question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Member Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that the words Tuesday 2 December 2014 be deleted and replaced with the words Tuesday 10 February 2015. The effect of the amendment that I have moved, Mr Speaker, would be to extend the report back timeframe from this current year through to the end of the summer adjournment of the Parliament to allow the Select Committee adequate time to give this bill due consideration. I hope that the other parties in the Parliament who have expressed similar concerns about the bill will also be supporting this amendment. Mr Speaker, the Labour Party, while we are supporting this legislation and will not impede the progress of the legislation, we do want to ensure that it is given adequate consideration. We have made a number of efforts to work with the government to extend the time frame for submissions, and we do appreciate the work that the government have done with us on that, but the reality is that reporting the bill to the Select Committee tonight and requiring it to be reported back to, giving it less than a week, so we're requiring it to be reported back this time next week, or less than this time next week in fact, doesn't give the committee adequate time to give the bill due consideration, and therefore we are moving the amendment. I want to canvass here that in our goodwill efforts to try and extend the time frame, we did canvass whether there was a way to extend the time frame beyond next Tuesday whilst still meeting the government's objective of having the bill passed before Christmas, and I'm told that one of the parliamentary procedures that we come up against is the rule that a bill that is reported back from Select Committee must sit on the table for 3 days before it can be considered again by the House, even if the House were to consider it again in urgency. It's an interesting aspect of parliamentary procedure that a bill can be passed from first reading through all stages in a single day under urgency, but it cannot be referred under urgency to a Select Committee for consideration, then brought back to the House and considered immediately under urgency for the remaining stages. It still has to sit on the table for 3 days. That's one of the factors that is constraining the Select Committee having that extra time next week to give the bill adequate consideration, and on balance, that's one of the reasons why we're moving this amendment. We want to ensure that the Select Committee has adequate time to hear from all of the groups, but also to all of the groups who have an interest, but also to consider what sensible amendments might be made. Members on this side of the House have spoken particularly, for example, about the 48-hour warrantless surveillance period that this bill provides for. One of the things that I certainly hope the committee will be able to do is look at some of the alternatives to that, whether it is that the period be shortened from 48 hours to other alternatives, including retrospective warrants, which is something that the House might not normally consider. There are a number of options that the committee could investigate that I think would provide some elegant solutions to the concerns that members have raised. I don't think they're going to be able to do that if effectively the only time they have to meet is Wednesday, Thursday and Friday this week, and then on Monday. That's 4 days that they will have to consider the bill, and I don't think that in that period of time they'll be able to do it justice, and therefore we're proposing to extend it to Tuesday the 10th of February, which would allow the government to progress that in the first week back, should that be what they want to do. We aren't, as I've said, trying to obstruct the passage of this legislation unnecessarily. We accept that there is a need for some of the passages of this bill to be progressed. However, we don't believe that 4 effective working days is a sufficient period of time for the committee to consider that. I note, for example, that the Australian Parliament is passing similar legislation at the moment and is allowing both of their houses of Parliament to give it adequate and proper and comprehensive Select Committee hearings, and that is something that we're effectively going to be denying if this resolution from the government is passed. I also note that the English Parliament will be introducing, I'm advised, that the English Parliament will be introducing legislation tomorrow that they have indicated they won't be voting on again until May. They are giving it that amount of deliberation and that amount of consideration. So if there is a degree of urgency around this, I think the government, incumbent upon the government, is an obligation to spell out more comprehensively exactly why this needs to be passed before Christmas. One of the things the Parliament did in its changes to the standing orders in 2011 was require that where a shortened Select Committee report back was required, and this is one of the shortest that you could possibly imagine, less than a week, where that is required, the Minister must specify with some particularity why that shortened period is required. Simply standing up and saying we think it's required because we want to get it passed before Christmas, that's not enough. If Chris Finlayson genuinely believes that there is some good reason for this bill to be passed prior to the Christmas adjournment, it was incumbent upon him to stand up in the House and spell that out, and he simply did not do that. We know that this issue has been kicking around for a good couple of years. The government were considering this issue and these issues several years ago, and they were put on the back burner because of the GCSB debacle, because they decided that they needed to get that legislation through first. And of course we know that they needed to get that legislation through first because they got caught in that web of deceit where the government's smear machine got caught in the GCSB scandal, and they got caught by that, so they wanted to deal with that issue first. But government incompetence is not a good enough reason for forcing a bill through in the space of a week, which is what this government are trying to do. They're trying to push it through, not because there's any more urgency on this than there was now several months ago, but because their incompetence has meant that they didn't deal with it when they intended to do, which was a long time ago. We have been very clear. We will work with the government on these issues because they're serious issues, and New Zealanders have a right to know that they are being dealt with very, very sensibly by the Parliament. David Shearer and Phil Goff have made very good contributions, as has our new leader Andrew Little, to this debate, spelling out the reservations that we have about this legislation, but also making it clear that we are not simply taking a blanket position that we're going to oppose this blanketly, because we do believe that the issues are serious and they deserve a proper hearing. How can they get a proper hearing in 4 working days? That is simply insufficient. It won't allow the committee time to do its job properly. Now, if there was a way that this bill could go to Select Committee and actually get proper deliberation and be reported back in time for it to be adequately considered by the House, then we would certainly be looking to work with the government on that. We have supported the bill at first reading because we believe that these issues are worthy of debate, but we will not be voting in favour of this truncated report back motion because we want the bill to be given adequate consideration. Having said that, we're not supporting simply extending the timeframe indefinitely or for 6 full months, as would be the case under the default settings. That's why we have proposed the report back date that we have of the first sitting week of the House, which begins on Tuesday the 10th of February, because it does allow the committee to give it adequate consideration. It means that the Parliament will be able to then reconsider the legislation at its earliest available opportunity, which is the first week that the Parliament is back after the summer adjournment, and I think that that's a very sensible timeframe. We're not being, I think, unnecessarily obstructive. I want to acknowledge the comments that Mark Mitchell made on the need for a consensus on national security issues. That is something that we in the Labour Party support. We do believe that there should be a consensus on national security issues. That is very difficult to achieve when we have a government that are willing to use the apparatus of the state in the form of national security agencies to run a vile smear campaign against people who disagree with them, which is what we have seen clear evidence of in the House this week and in the public this week, and it is simply not good enough. The public need to have confidence that these issues are being dealt with seriously. Part of the confidence that they can have in that process is through having a select committee process where all of the issues are adequately canvassed, where the public of New Zealand have the opportunity to make submissions. The public of New Zealand, many of whom will be hearing about this for the first time today when it's debated in Parliament, and are being told that they literally have a period of about 48 hours to get their views into the select committee before the bill will be deliberated on and reported back. That's not good enough. That's not going to give the public of New Zealand the confidence that these issues are being dealt with adequately, that their human rights are being adequately protected by the legislation. So as I've been very clear from the outset, we are not going to be unnecessarily obstructing the progress of this legislation, but we are going to be making it very clear that we want it to be adequately deliberated upon, that we want people who are affected by it to have the adequate opportunity to have their say through a democratic process. This government are not delivering that, and that's why we will be moving this amendment, and in the event that the government vote against the amendment, we'll be voting against the truncated Select Committee report back timeframe.